Okay, here we are on Friday. Monday again. I don't like Mondays normally, but I do like them when Pat McArt is on the other end of the line.
How you doing, Jude? Doesn't time fly? You don't know whether it's Friday or Monday.
It just means I'm getting old. But
No, it doesn't.
anyway, we're going to do.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I said go ahead.
Yeah. What we're going to do today was to have a look at this book. It's by Paul Gosling, and it's a very detailed study of what the challenges are, what the problems are, what are the myths, what are the actual facts about the difference between Northern Ireland and the South, and what unification would mean in practical terms. I think it's an absolutely superb book, actually, in the detail it goes into. You were involved with the compiling of that to some extent, Pat.
Yeah, I was, Jude, but let's get this clear. My involvement was peripheral. I was involved in the original, but I'm not going to try and take any credit for this. This is Paul's work all on his own. So for me to take any credit for it would be ridiculous. I was involved in some of the sub-editing and some of the original putting it together, but that's it.
That's good. So what would you say, Pat, if you're asked to point to one thing from the study, and there are, I don't know, many chapters in it, what would you point to as being most valuable, really, in this piece of work?
Jude, actually, I didn't know you were going to ask that question, but it's strange that, and I genuinely didn't, but I wrote this down because the one thing that struck me in the middle of the book, and I read it again this morning just because I knew we were having this conversation. Bear with me when I read this. The union with Britain has been an economic calamity for Northern Ireland. All the people have suffered, Catholic and Protestant, Unionists and Nationalists. In 1920, 80% of the industrial output of the entire island came from the three counties around Belfast. Belfast was the biggest city in Ireland in 1911, larger than Dublin, and was home to Ireland's innovation and technology at partition. The north was at partition. The north was industrial and rich. The south, agriculture and poor. Just a wee bit more. The Republic's economy is now 4 times larger, generated by a workforce that is only 2.5 times bigger. The Republic's industrial output is 10 times greater than that of Northern Ireland. Exports from the Republic are 17 times greater than Northern Ireland. Average income per head in the Republic is at almost 40,000. At worst, at 23,700 in the north. Dublin is 3 times bigger than Belfast, and is home to hundreds of international companies. Now, I could keep going on, but you just bore the hell out of you with facts. But switch it around, and it's basically in a 1 century. Look how much things have changed. And Jude, you could keep going on. Those are facts provided by David McWilliams, the guy who predicted the crash of the Irish banks and all that. So this guy, and he's not particularly known for either his nationalist or his unionist views. He's simply an economist. And that's contained in Paul Gosling's book. And that struck me as massively telling the story of what's happened on this island in this last 100 years.
Yes, I think I agree with you. A very important point. It's actually got to do with how you look at this question of reunification or, continuing part of the UK. Because I think in many unionists' thinking, there is this notion that the South is still slightly benighted, backward sort of place compared to the North, which has got the links with the UK. But as you say, that the facts don't support that at all. The economy in the South, certainly until Brexit set in, and maybe COVID as well, it was vastly more successful than was that of the North.
Can I interrupt you? Have you ever listened to Jim Allister? He comes on and he says, why would we join the Republic, the most indebted? He never mentions that Britain is actually more indebted than Greece. But sorry, Jude, go ahead.
Yeah, good point, all right. Well, the chapter that caught my eye, one of the chapters was the one on health. Because that's something that's very often brought up by people. Unionists will say, well, in a United Ireland, who wants to be in a United Ireland where you're going to have to pay when you're going to the doctor every time? Yeah. And I mean, you're in the southern jurisdiction, Pat. Do you find that a pressing thing? The fact that any visit to the doctor with children or with yourselves?
No, Jude, I have to explain. I spent all my life as a cross-border worker. And one of the few benefits I get is the fact that I'm entitled to a medical card. But having said that, they here when you go to the doctor, you have to pay. I think it's maybe 50 or 60 euros. Now that is a very serious charge and a burden. But there's this thing, and I think maybe you're more up to speed on than I am. There's a 10-year plan now. Whether COVID affects that, you know, this slanted care, and the aim is to dovetail the Republic's healthcare system with that of Britain, like the NHS. But Jude, I made the point 5, 6, 7 times over this last while. In the Republic, we spend more on health than most other European countries, but our outcomes are not as good. So what we need to do is get our act together and get it run properly. Now, if we're spending more per head than Germany, but our outcomes are worse, there's something wrong with the management, not the spending.
Yeah. Certainly, there's. I think you need to look carefully at the South's problems in terms of health, and there are real problems, no doubt about that. But to quote the NHS as it operates in the North is a shaky sort of argument because, as everybody knows, the NHS in the North is in crisis. It's suffering from underfunding and understaffing to an extent that's really appalling. In addition to that, if you look on the positive side, you have Derry's Altnagelvin, which is a cancer centre for people from the south and people from the north. And you have Dublin as a centre for cardiac problems for children. I think
for the All Island.
There is the fact that the south is a big spender. Actually spends more, as you say, per capita than the north does. So the argument Paul Gosling makes is that there is a gap, certainly, but that is a gap which is decreasing because the South has involved itself in bigger expenditure. It has got targets for Sláinte care, which at one stage was to get, half the population onto free medicine at the point of delivery. But one reason or another, that didn't happen. But as I understand it from Gosling's book, now, COVID may have changed this, but for September 2020, this month, there was to be free healthcare at the point of delivery for over 7 days and for youngsters up to 8 years old. Now, that's not a perfect situation, but my memory of when our kids were young, that was the thing, that's what you were always going to the doctor for, was your child had a cough, up to that age. And once they hit sort of puberty, it wasn't quite nearly as big a problem. But that idea of looking after the very young and looking after the very old and then trying to work to make it universal seems to be a very sensible one. The other point that Paul Gosling makes in this is that the fact of the matter is that in the South, per capita, there are more doctors, more nurses, more hospital beds than there are in the North. So there are parts of the South's healthcare system which actually are ahead of the North. Now that's not it's ahead of
No, Jude, some of the people are trying to portray this as that the South is some sort of third world country in regard to it. That's not true. It's so far from it. The problem is we're spending a lot of money and it's a two-tier system, and that tends to generate bad publicity. But there are parts of the South's healthcare system that is far superior to the North, and that never gets mentioned. And once you're actually in the system, the care in the South is absolutely superb, and I'm well of that from within my own family circle.
I think Paul Gosling also stresses the fact that in his vision of a united or reunited Ireland, there would be a 10-year period of transition, and part of that 10-year period of transition would be to the narrowing and the elimination of this gap that is there at present. But given the fact that, a border poll is at least, what I would say about a year or more away at the most, at the quickest. I know that Professor Colin Harvey has said May, I think it is 2023. So that's like 3 years from now. But, in that time, if things keep going the way they're going, then this gap between the North and the South in terms of healthcare will have diminished. I have to applaud the South in that, not applaud them, I condemn them in one respect that they've gone through so many Celtic tigers, etc., but they didn't fix the health system. But I would applaud them in terms of the moves they are apparently making to match the kind of care that is available in the North. So
Yeah.
it's a for somebody in the north to complain about the south. In a way, you're really preaching to the converted. People in the south know that. I think the government,
Yeah,
the politicians
exactly.
in the south know that,
But
and they're
look,
working on it.
it's this just isn't about health. Like the education system in the South, there a lot of the American companies, and Paul Gosling did as well, who are the foreign direct investment, they come to the Republic because the Republic has got a highly educated, motivated workforce. A lot of young people with technology degrees and scientific degrees and all the rest of it. They wouldn't come here if those people weren't available and the standard of education wasn't high. So they're getting those people. You go down, anywhere down south, look at the roads, massive improvement. The infrastructure, massive improvement. Like where I am living in rural Donegal. My broadband is probably better than Belfast. So this is not. The old shibboleths and myths are, they're grand for stereotyping, but they're not real.
Another thing that Paul Gosling deals with, and again, it's one of the things that comes up always with unionists if you discuss this matter with them. They say the health system, but even before that, they'll say things like, sure, the South can't afford the North. I mean, we get an annual subvention of £10 billion.
Yeah.
Now, Paul Gosling deals with that, and he questions a lot of things that are never mentioned when people quote that figure of 10 billion or 9 billion even. He points out, for example, that included in that figure are things like debt interest for the UK general, royal family expenses,
military,
armed forces expenses. He points out that in a reunited Ireland, the question of pensions would in many cases be the responsibility, arguably, of the UK, because people would have worked within the UK system and expect to get their pensions from them, of course. He also points out something that people don't deal with, and it's a tricky one, and that is the huge number of people in the north who are public sector workers. I mean, it's abnormally swollen. It's something like 30% of the workforce. Now, that's not the case in the south. So if you had unity, I think the move would be to try to wean these people off or eventually fade out the bloated public sector as workers and have them working, as most people in the south are, working in the private sector as just normal workers. So the fact that it is so many public sector workers in the north is a huge expense, really, which could be lessened given a.
But Jude, look at the other thing as well. There's a hell of a lot of duplication of services. Would we need two police forces? Would we need two sets of civil servants? Even in the north, like two sets of schools, the state schools and then the other sectors. In fact, are there three? There are integrated schools, there are Catholic schools or whatever, and then there's the public schools or state schools. Like all that sort of stuff. I think at the Alliance Party, I think I read in Paul's book somewhere in recent days that there's something like 2 billion. They reckon there's 2 billion due to duplication of services. Like that could be saved as well. There's a whole lot of things. Like a lot of these. There's lies, damn lies, and then statistics. A lot of the stuff in the north is covered over by this veil of, oh no, you couldn't afford it. We don't even know what the real facts are.
Well, this is a part I particularly like about Gosling's book. He really gets down to brass tacks. I am no economist at all, but I am very impressed by the way in which he presents his argument and supports it time and again with simple figures and with graphs and with tables. So one other chapter that caught my eye was chapter 7, Pat, and that was to do with the role or the place of Protestants in the South. Now, again, this is something that unionists will frequently cite. They will say, when the Free State was established, 10% of the population was Protestant. At present, the population in the South is something like 2%. And that's probably true. But what we're not dealing with is the past, we're dealing with the present and the future. And in chapter 7, Paul Gosling points out that the Protestant experience in the South actually is a very positive one. For example, some of the people that are revered in the history in the South since independence are Protestants, like Sam Maguire, the Sam Maguire Cup, the All-Ireland Football Final Cup. Sean O'Casey, one of the greatest playwrights Ireland's ever produced. W.B. Yeats, there's a whole centre down there in Sligo for him. Erskine Childers, just one of 2 Protestant presidents since the state was founded. And even as recent as Mary Robinson, who while Catholic herself or at least Catholic background, was married to a Protestant, or is married to a Protestant.
Yeah, and has a Protestant background.
Many of her family. So this notion, that there's some kind of conspiracy to squeeze out Protestantism in the South is such rubbish, really. I think they're still living with the notion of the Catholic Church as it was.
Well, yeah, Andy Pollock, who was a very well-respected journalist. Andy, who was the Irish Times guy in the North for a long time. Andy Pollock said the South is actually, and Andy's a Protestant, a very decent place for Protestants to live. That the old days, I think he quoted Garrett Fitzgerald or somebody along those lines, that is now a very pluralistic society. Jude, you can check out, and like the South, it's the first place to vote for single-sex marriage. You can get a divorce, you can get an abortion if you want. It's a very liberal society. So this sort of thing, the old days of home rule was Rome rule, that day is so ridiculously out of place that it's very much changed. There's some people might say some of those changes aren't for the better, but you can't use it against them either.
Oh, for sure. I have got in-laws who live in the South. In fact, all my in-laws live in the South. And they would say, for example, that Protestants certainly are a small sliver of the population, but they certainly pull their weight in terms of public life. If you take a number of the people like Senator David Norris, or if you take Ivan Yates, who used to be a big noise.
Or Judge Catherine McGuinness.
Yes. The whole range, Heather Humphreys, there's a whole range of prominent politicians in the South. The other thing is, in the world of business, Protestants are very prominent. They're very active, and they contribute a great deal towards the state. And for that matter, I know for a fact in the Foreign Affairs Department, there are a number of Protestants who are either, they may not be ambassadors, but they're certainly high up in the hierarchy, so to speak,
of the civil service
embassies throughout the world. So if you ask Protestant ministers whose church has, most Protestant churches are all Ireland churches for a start, like the Church of Ireland or the Presbyterians or whatever, they will tell you that in fact they are very much supported by the state. And in fact, the state sometimes worries that they get into trouble, the degree to which they are supportive of Protestant churches and Protestant institutions. So if I was a Protestant in the North, that's one thing I wouldn't worry too much about, what my place would be in the place of my religion or my faith in the United Ireland.
But Jude, it's really now a question of, things are changing. And I suppose the South is going to have a look at itself. What rather than wait down 10 years down the track, maybe it's time for the All Ireland to have a look at, say, what can we do to sort of extend the hand of friendship? Like I got into a big debate with a guy some time back. Like, should Ireland, the Republic, rejoin the Commonwealth? Now I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying we should have a discussion about it. But it should be a discussion point. Should we change the national anthem? Someone like Danny Boy, inclusive of North, South. The old tradition, and it was written, it was first noted by I think Jane Ross and played by a blind Willie McCurry or something. And it speaks to Catholic, Protestant, and dissenter. Now I'm just throwing these things out, but somewhere down the line, Mark Daly is one of the first people I came across. He's a Fianna Fáil senator, and he says when people fail to sort of look to the future and make plans for it, it rarely goes unpunished. I think the Unionist government proved that they didn't know what was coming down the track. Well, the South, the Republic, the Dublin government should see what way the wind's blowing and sort of say, right, what do we need to do to put on a platform here to see what the road ahead is?
I would suggest, and we'll maybe leave it at that time. I would suggest that if there are nationalists / Republicans who are serious about looking at and planning for the possibility of a reunited Ireland. And if there are unionists who are concerned about the future and the fact that the demographics are shifting, Brexit has put a question mark where there wasn't a question mark before, that they use a text such as Paul Gosling's book as a beginning, as a starting point. And I mean, if there's a counter books that would be different and take a unionist perspective and
let's see them.
Comparable facts and figures, great. But sit down and use those as the basis for discussion and for conclusions that you could draw from it. But this notion of sort of sitting back and sitting on your hands and saying, well, we're too busy doing other things. I think
Yeah.
that's crazy. That really is a recipe for disaster. As you say, Mark Dilly said, there's lack of preparation rarely goes unpunished.
Yeah.
What was it Roy Keane said? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
But they fail, yep, exactly. So, that book, Jude, let me put it up there as well. That book, Jude, no matter what anybody said, Paul has spent more than a year, possibly up nearly 2 years doing this. There's a lot of work when they did. There's a lot of research. There's 240, I think, one footnotes. That's a lot of research and a lot of reference to sources. This was not put together overnight, that were written on the back of a cigarette packet. The detail, the knowledge, the academic research is all there. Hand it to any civil servant and say, right, know what you do? I'm proving that. There's the floor, work from there, build up.
That's right. It'd be nice to see the whole thing discussed in practical terms with verifiable data rather than just, sort of patriotic barroom talk or unionist talk, as the case may be.
Yeah.
That's a very invigorating. I'm not used to thinking so hard.
You did most of the talking today.
Okay, Pat. Thanks very much.
Okay, Jude. Cheers. Good luck to you.